Looks like we have a number of people on the call and it is 4 p.m. So I think that this will be a good time to get things kicked off. So hello everyone and welcome to the Technology Happy Hour. My name is Sarah Salkup and I am a program coordinator here at Virginia Clean Cities. Today we will be hearing from Jennifer Wallace-Brodeur from VEIC. Jennifer is VEIC's Director of Clean Transportation. She sets the strategic direction for transportation work at the organization, oversees a staff of consulting professionals, and leads clean transportation policy development for VEIC. For over 20 years, she has successfully led teams to advance program and policy solutions on a range of issues at the national, state, and local level. At VEIC, her work is focused on transportation electrification, including strategies to accelerate adoption of electric cars, school buses, and transit buses. Prior to joining VEIC, Jennifer led AARP's National Livable Communities program, setting organizational strategy, executing programming in states and communities, and developing resources to educate and support local officials to help develop age-friendly programs and policies. Jennifer is an active community volunteer serving for 8 years as commissioner and then chair of the Burlington Electric Commission and 10 years as a Burlington Planning Commissioner.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And I'm gonna attempt the technology. That's always the best part, right? Get my screen. And let me just get to slideshow. Okay, is everybody seeing that?
Looks great.
Perfect. So my name is Jennifer Wallace-Brodeur and I lead the Clean Transportation Group at VEIC, and I'm really happy to be joining you for this happy hour. I am very happy to be a partner with Virginia Clean Cities. They are probably one of our most important partners in the Mid-Atlantic region and definitely in Virginia. So this is just a thrill to meet all of you who are part of this organization and share a little bit more information about who we are and what we do. So VEIC is a nonprofit organization. We are based in Winooski, Vermont, which is right next to Burlington. And we are very focused on coming up with the energy solutions that our world needs, and particularly focusing on decarbonization and the challenge of climate change that all of our communities are facing right now. We try to be an objective partner. We are technology agnostic and very much base our analysis and recommendations to all of our clients in real world experience, so that we're bringing the most up-to-date and informed information that we can to everybody that we work with. And we are not a cookie cutter organization. We customize all of our approaches to our clients' needs and how they can make a difference using the resources that we bring to the table in partnership with them. So as I mentioned, we're based in Vermont, but we are a national organization and have worked all across the country for many years. We were founded in 1986. And we have close to 300 employees that are in some cases located in different parts of the country. And we're actually seeing a trend where we're seeing a lot more remote workers in this time of COVID, where people can work from anywhere. So actually the places that our employees are actually located is beginning to get more diverse on this map. But most of our folks are based in Vermont, and we also have a significant office based in Washington, D.C. of staff that administer the District of Columbia Sustainable Energy Utility. So we have a significant footprint in the district, and we also have offices in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Hawaii as well. So we have folks all over the place. And we have a very diverse staff of experts. We have consultants, engineers, we have people that do policy work, marketing. We have analysts, program implementers. You can see the list here, but we have quite a deep bench on a number of areas of expertise and capabilities within the organization. So with that said, our clean transportation team is about, I'd say about 15 people in the organization contribute on projects within our clean transportation portfolio. And this is what I would call our core team. We've actually added one more person that's not represented here that I'll introduce in a second, but just wanted to give you a flavor for who we are and what our expertise is. So you heard a little bit about me in the introduction. And Dave Gelman, I think, is familiar to most of you. He's on the board. He's also on the Virginia Clean Cities Policy Committee. He's been a part of the Clean Cities program for, I think, ever since it was maybe created. So a long time Clean Cities resource and supporter, and we're just thrilled to have him on our team.
Hey,
And
hey
with that-
Jen,
Yeah.
I maintain I was in the room when the baby was delivered. I actually worked on the original program plan for Clean Cities before the program even came out. And Alan is the 4th executive director of Virginia Clean Cities with whom I have worked.
Holy cow, Dave. That is quite a background. So with all of that expertise, he's obviously got a deep background in alternative fuels and federal and state policy. And he is a very important staff partner to me as we grow the footprint of our clean transportation work. And I'm just thrilled that he's in the region and has deep connections in the Mid-Atlantic to bring to the table. So that's wonderful. I also, you were also introduced to Howard Harris on the call. He's actually a relatively new member of the transportation team here at VEIC, but he is also based out of our DC office. And before coming to actually the DCSU, he was working for Clean Energy Fuels and supporting transit fleets and school bus fleets up and down the East Coast to adopt alternative fuels. So we are just thrilled to have him on board. He's actually taking a leadership role in a number of our school bus projects and will be stepping in on some of our transit projects as we move forward in that area. Dave Roberts is a senior consultant. He is our light duty EV expert. He is based in our Vermont office. He's been at VEIC longer than I have. He was one of the original staff on the clean transportation team. He has done, I think, pretty much everything you could possibly do related to consumer adoption of EVs. He manages the Drive Electric Vermont program, which is has been a DOE case study for rural adoption of EVs. He focuses on equity, policy, outreach, and education. We're administering an incentive program that he's leading right now. And he also has quite a bit of expertise in EVSE siting issues and plans. Ben Lake may be familiar to some of you. He actually was part of led the Maine Clean Cities program for several years before coming to VEIC. He is a consultant on our team and leads transit, school bus, and alternative fuel programs. And he actually also runs several of our EV fleet study projects. So he covers a lot of ground. He's based in Portland, Maine, and we're thrilled to have him. And then the last person I wanted to mention is Tom Fisher. He actually is also based in our Vermont office. He is an EVSE expert and also the point person for a lot of the evaluation programs that we're doing. So he helps us figure out how we're going to collect data when we're evaluating fleet vehicles that are electrified. He identifies the sources of data, how those are all going to fit together to paint a picture of how the vehicles are performing. And he also analyzes the data and then translates it for our clients so that they have something actionable to work from. We just hired another person that I want to mention. His name is Vince Caristo. He comes to us from a transit agency in Missoula, Montana, where they've been electrifying their transit fleet. He is based in New York City and will be also helping out quite a bit with our transit electrification work and also with some of our EVSE projects. So that's our team. There's several others, as I mentioned, that contribute in one way or another to this work, but have other projects in their portfolio but these folks are ones that are pretty exclusively devoted to transportation work. So what is our transportation work? What does VEIC do in this space? We are almost exclusively focused on vehicle electrification projects. We started in 2012 and we had a broader portfolio at that time. We did some smart growth, we did some transportation demand management work, but given that VEIC is an energy company focused on energy efficiency and renewable energy, we really felt that vehicle electrification was much more aligned with all of the expertise that we can bring to the table in the organization. And it was frankly where we were getting most of our work. So we decided to really focus on that. We do everything from planning through implementation and evaluation. And we do, as I mentioned, with Dave Roberts' work, focus on outreach and education and consumer adoption of EVs. So a lot of our work is hands-on with fleets, helping them go through the process. Once they decide they might want to adopt EVs, we can help them figure out what the best ways to do that are. We can help with procurement. We help with sort of upfront studies to determine if it makes sense to adopt EVs. And as I mentioned, then we can help with evaluation once they've procured vehicles and want to see if they're getting the benefits that were advertised to them. We have quite a bit of interest in equity issues and some of the harder to address issues. So we've done some work related to program design around low and moderate income and rural EV adoption, and also have done a decent amount of work on how to engage dealers in selling EVs. And actually have done just wrapping up a pilot in New York State to identify the best ways to incentivize dealers to become more engaged in that process. So I think some of you might be aware, but we are in partnership with Virginia Clean Cities to do an electric school bus project in the Mid-Atlantic region. We're really excited to be a part of that team. And so I thought I'd take a little bit of time to talk about what we do around electric school buses. VEIC got into this space early, and so we are a national expert on electric school buses. And these are some of the things because we've had several years of working directly with fleets, doing pilots and other programs, we have quite a bit that we bring to the table in this space. One of the things we've learned is that schools are challenged by capacity in general, and their primary mission is to educate students. And so sometimes it's pretty difficult for them to find the capacity or expertise to adopt electric school buses. And that's where we come in. We really think it's important that they have a partner to help them go through what can be a pretty complicated process for them and make sure that they successfully deploy these vehicles and have a good experience, because a bad experience can poison the apple, not just for them, but others in the long run. So we provide resources and technical assistance to help increase the awareness of the technology and to support successful deployments. We've administered pilot projects. We actually did the first public evaluation of electric school buses in the country in Massachusetts. That project wrapped up in 2018 and actually provided a lot of lessons that we've been sharing out to the world ever since. And we're currently administering a pilot in Vermont that is funded through VW, and we're piloting electric school buses in 3 school districts and transit buses in 1 transit agency as a part of that project. We help identify routes that are appropriate for electrification. That's really key, that you get the right routes, especially with initial deployments. We plan for charging infrastructure. This can be the most complicated element of a project, a lot of moving pieces there. So we can provide support for all aspects of procuring, installing, and all the facility upgrades that might need to be undertaken to get that charging infrastructure in place. We help with procurement. We've written RFPs, we've evaluated RFPs, we've helped folks through the process to understand some of their choices when it comes to things like batteries and warranties and training staff and all sorts of things that are a bit new with electric buses. And then we do data collection, analysis, and evaluation of the buses once they are on the road. And we also help with fundraising if needed. So here are some of our projects in the different areas that we are supporting. So I just went through some of the work we're doing on electric school buses. The project I mentioned that we're working closely with Virginia Clean Cities on is the Mid-Atlantic Electric School Bus Experience Project. This is the US DOE funded project. Virginia Clean Cities is the prime, and we're a part of that team with Clean Cities coalitions in the region. The purpose of that project is to build awareness and understanding of the vehicles. So we are seeking to get demonstration buses into the hands of school districts in the region for extended periods of time and collect data to support the field and understanding how the vehicles perform, and also to get those buses in front of people and a lot of information about how the technology works and issues you need to be thinking about to deploy them. So it's a really important project to build awareness about electric school buses in the region and experience with them too. We are working with the World Resources Institute to develop resources for their electric school bus program and provide technical assistance to school districts that are partnering with them. I mentioned the Vermont electric school bus pilot and the Massachusetts demonstration as well. And those are just a few examples of the school bus work that we do. We also do a transit electrification projects and are hoping to do more of that with Howard Harris and Vince Carista coming on staff and in their deep background working with transit agencies and with their expertise. So we're excited about that as a growing area in our portfolio. We are leading a project with the Martha's Vineyard Transit Authority to fully electrify their transit fleet, supported with a renewably powered microgrid, which includes battery storage. And that's a very innovative project to not only get that fleet electrified, but to provide resiliency when the power goes out and to manage demand charges, which is the purpose of the microgrid. So happy to talk a little bit more about that. That's a super exciting project. And then we work with the Vermont Agency of Transportation and all of the Vermont-based transit providers to support their electrification work. The state of Vermont is pushing electrification among their transit providers and has been getting low-no applications over the last 5 years that we're very happy to be a part of writing, and to support getting electric buses into the hands of the transit providers that are operating in the state. And then this general EV adoption, I mentioned we do Drive Electric Vermont, which is a consumer outreach and education program. We're working with our energy efficiency utility in the state of Vermont as they start to add transportation programs. We're working with National Grid to do EV fleet studies in Rhode Island. And we're working with ADUSA, which is a grocery store chain in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic that is looking to electrify their last mile delivery services. That's an 800 vehicle fleet with locations across the region. And we're looking at helping them figure out their charging strategy for that program.
Hey, Jen, if I can,
Yeah.
for those of you in Northern Virginia, ADUSA is actually Ahold Delhaize. They are the parent of Giant Food in Northern Virginia. So Peapod is what we're talking about. Peapod delivery trucks.
And they keep changing their name. When we started the project, it was Peapod. Now we call it ADUSA. So thank you, Dave. I also wanted to share that, as I mentioned, equity is a key part of our portfolio. So we've done work to analyze the energy burden in several states, including transportation energy burden. The purpose of those studies is to really highlight how the cost of energy for electricity, for heating and cooling buildings, and for transportation, how those costs are distributed across various jurisdictions, and how they impact low-income and middle-income households in particular. Those have been revealing, because what we found is that transportation makes up the majority of energy spending in most households, and in many cases is unaffordable for low-income households. So that has spurred policy action and helped target programs in these states. We also are working on a EV rural adoption toolkit for the Nature Conservancy that's going to cover northern New England states that have particular challenges with vast sort of rural areas and challenges with EV adoption in those places. We're working on a low and moderate income EV adoption pilot with NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I think I got that right, but it's essentially the state energy office for New York. And we're looking at some of the challenges for low and moderate EV adoption in upstate New York. So again, focused in a rural area. And we are also doing a really interesting project where we're looking at what would happen by offering combined school and transit service in rural areas of Vermont. So the idea is that we operate two public transportation systems in many states, school and public transit. And are there ways that we could combine those services, as transit being the underlying service, and reduce costs for school districts and improve transportation services in general for those communities? And then we're doing some carbon planning work as well. So we've done a net zero action plan for the city of Montpelier that included its fleet operations, and we're doing a carbon planning project for New Hampshire food co-ops, again with vehicles as part of that analysis. And that's it. I'm going to stop talking. This is the contact information for myself and Dave, although you all should be able to know how to find Dave, and he shows up at your meetings more than I do, but please reach out to us anytime if you have questions or would like to connect with us. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from the audience. And should I stop sharing? I can always go back, I guess.
If you want to leave up your contact information for just a minute in case anyone wants to jot it down, but you are free
Sure.
to take it down in a minute if you want to. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. I also had one question that was submitted prior to us opening up the meeting today, and that was from Emily Shorin. And Emily, I know that you are on the call. I don't know if that's a question that you want to ask.
I honestly don't remember what I wrote down, so you can go ahead and ask it.
Well, awesome. So Emily wrote in, what barriers other than vehicle availability are holding back fleets from adopting electric vehicles?
Oh, that's a really good question. We've been doing fleet studies, as I mentioned, in Rhode Island and other places now too. And there's a lot of different things that are coming into play. So often fleets are interested in a total cost of ownership analysis. One of the things we've found, particularly for public fleets, is that vehicles don't drive very many miles. And so it makes that total cost of ownership really challenging when you don't drive a lot of miles. So low mileage vehicles can be really difficult to show a positive return over the life of the vehicle. So that's one thing. So if they're really focused on sort of the financial, they want to see a positive TCO, it's sometimes hard to find vehicles with high enough mileage, and we usually can, but it's not the whole fleet, or sometimes even the majority of the fleet. It might just be a handful of vehicles that have that high enough mileage for that positive TCO. So having different metrics is something that we need to be thinking about. And that upfront cost of vehicles definitely is a challenge. It's more of a challenge, I would say, with the heavy duty vehicles like buses in some cases than light duty, as the cost of the light duty vehicles are coming down or getting more on par. For public fleets too, they can't always take advantage of some of the tax credits. So that can be a challenge. They can't sort of make up the difference with the with extra funding or those tax credits that consumers can get, although there are definitely programs out there that will help with that. I think the other thing we found is that charging is very challenging. That seems to be the thing where people really get hung up. They're like, vehicles, they can kind of get their head around that it's an electric vehicle, but they can't figure out, like, how do we think about our charging, not just immediately, but long term? Because I think most of them understand if they get a couple EVs, they might be looking at more. And how do you plan ahead for that? How can they wrap their head around what they might need in the future? So that can be a barrier as well. And then we just find the same barriers that you have with consumer adoption of EVs comes into play with fleets. Like, they'll be like, well, you know, we got a big snowstorm once a year and the EV won't be able to work on that. Or there aren't the right models out there, so you can have a like for like replacement of vehicles. So there's some of the things that come into play with consumer EV adoption also come into play with fleets, is what we found. So those are some of the challenges off the top of my head. I wouldn't say that awareness of EVs is an issue. People know they're out there by and large. But so it's more of those tricky questions that are sort of out there for them that they, in many cases, need help to answer.
Hey, Jen, if I can too. Emily, you know, the other thing I'd throw out here is sort of the inertial mass problem too. I mean, you know, you're talking about a new vehicle type. Fleet managers got a job to do and make sure that they're either delivering packages or moving students, or, you know, making sure the trucks are getting to a site to do something, you know, and there's often a hesitation by fleet managers to say, you know, what I've got now works perfectly fine for me. Why do I need to change? At the same time, that kind of attitude probably is going to get hammered on even more as time goes on, as all of us on this call know, because there are reasons to change. But, you know, a fleet manager's first reaction is going to be, I need to be able to meet the need. Can these things meet the need? And that's a large inertial mass that you got to get past.
Thank you. I'm glad I retroactively asked that question. So thanks for bringing it up, Sarah.
Good question.
And actually, we got a couple of more folks who've joined the call recently, both of whom I know relatively well. Robin Jones from Virginia Energy is here. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, I was working hard for you all on another EV related call today. I'm glad to see you all didn't wait around for me, but anyway, I'll be listening to the recording. Thanks.
Let me guess, State Corporation Commission by any chance?
It was part of that, a little of that, and a little kind of add on to that.
Yep, Alan and I were both in that. I actually had to leave in the afternoon because I had another webinar I had to go to too. But yep, State Corporation Commission's discussion today was very interesting. We've also been joined by Helen from Arlington County, my home county. So welcome, Helen. It's great to have you here.
Hi, guys. I was on another EV webinar too, so just overlapping. So happy to see you guys. I can say a quick hi.
Everybody's talking EVs.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Sure.
Good to see you.
Here. Well, for people who did join late, I will be sending out a link to the recording in about a week, so everyone will have access to that. And to fill everyone in who's just hopped on, we are asking questions, just having a space for open discussion. So if anyone has any questions, either shout them out or feel free to put them in the chat.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Kyle Allwine from Northern Neck Electric Cooperative. My vice president and I were actually having a discussion today where we were talking about the fact that if we really want to encourage small businesses in rural communities to electrify their fleets, we may want to start thinking about leading that charge. but we're also the ones that, need to drive trucks that can go 18 inches through mud and snow and bucket trucks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you're talking about, the technical specs for those things are so specific. How do you all balance?
Good news is, for bucket trucks, you can get a truck that's got an electric bucket on it now, so you don't have to idle the truck the whole time.
Right. And that's a problem for us with, that's where we see beneficial electrification saying, it's better. It's a better alternative, not just, a PR stunt or anything like that. But in some cases, they're not yet better. So for company, as we try to walk our members through that process and even ourselves, how do you translate those technical specifications that are needed in balancing them with the current technological needs? Is there any way to roadmap it to say, hey, the technology is not there today, but it will be in 2 years, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. Time is one factor you have to take into account when you're looking at a fleet electrification study. I'll let Jen go on, but I mean, yeah, the idea is that, okay, look at your entire fleet and figure out which part of it is easiest to do now. Phase in that way. There's no question vocational vehicles are tough to begin with. And then when you talk about vocational vehicles that are going to be electric, yeah, that's something that's going to phase in a little bit over time. There's a couple of vocations like trash trucks people are doing, but specialty trucks, yeah, it's going to take a little longer. So look at the part of your fleet you can do easily now. Look at how you use your vehicles too to see where they make sense. Jen?
I don't have too much more to add to that. I do think that like on the light duty side or the small truck side, we're beginning to see some headway. I think the F-150 announcement's a significant announcement because they also are sort of the chassis for a lot of other like cutaway buses and box trucks and other things. So that's a really big deal. So I keep my eye on that for the lighter duty, smaller truck market. For the specialty trucks, I think Dave's right. Like we're beginning to see more models. This market is beginning to open up, but it's definitely on the front end. So if it depends on sort of what your goals are, but if you're trying to sort of get people comfortable with EVs, as Dave said, looking at the low-hanging fruit of vehicles that are on the market, pretty well proven, and getting those into the fleet to just show that they can perform is probably a good idea to get started. And then, just watch the market because stuff is beginning to break loose that we haven't been seeing out there. I know that one of the utilities in Vermont here just is doing a pilot with an electric utility truck, so that I think they got from Lion Bus. So it's out there, but I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how that goes and how well it performs. But so it's relatively new, but things like that are starting to show up. Like we're starting to see street sweepers that are electric, and we're even doing a project with snowmobiles that are electric at one of the ski areas. So things are beginning to show up on the market that haven't been there before. But it's going to be a few years, I think, before you have a lot of choices, and maybe till the technology is really, you feel comfortable that it's proven technology.
Yeah, I think you will see a change though in certain sectors. So with the Ford Transit coming next year in particular too, and
Yep.
as Jen was saying, the Ford Transit, provides a basis for small buses even,
Yep.
and cutaways and things like that. I was actually at an international truck event on Tuesday, and in addition to the new IC electric bus, which was the purpose of the event, they also had a Navistar medium duty box truck sitting there. I don't know. I'm thinking it's probably like, I don't know, 26,000 GVWR, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe 30,000. So, I mean, and they've actually had some of those running around for a while, but, they're starting to get more of them now. So, you'll see it over time, but focus on the part of the fleet you can do easier, but also any thought about moving toward electrification for a fleet, the first thing you got to do is look at your vehicles and how are you using them. how far are they going? What are you doing with them? That sort of thing. That's where any fleet has to, any fleet analysis really has to start. And then you can start factoring against that, what's ready when.
Yeah, our lowest hanging fruit that we saw was our forklifts that we use in our
Mhm.
warehouse spaces. So,
Yep.
and maybe even encouraging members to, that we would do a grant program to get their forklifts, we'll pay the difference, so to speak,
Yep.
just to get them to switch or
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, cool. Well, thank you guys
Yeah,
for your
that's-
insight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a good application because it's also indoors and help clean up the indoor air. There's some good benefits from that.
And it's another application we've been talking about looking at
Yep.
for some clients too.
Yep. So I saw a question in the chat, look like, about you grants and incentives. So I will defer to folks in Virginia about what's out there for that's Virginia specific, but there are certainly a number of federal programs, and the VW settlement has obviously been a big part of pushing the EV market in many states. Buses has been a pretty popular program for states, and most of the states have used the 15% they can to build out EV charging networks and to offer EV charging programs. And then obviously there's a number of other classes of vehicles that are eligible for VW funding. So that's definitely something to take a look at. But beyond that, there's federal school bus programs, federal transit programs. There's the CMAQ program that can potentially support trucks. There's the DARA program that I think is buses and trucks. So there's a number of federal programs, but what I think the big money is coming with the legislation that's being considered in DC now. So there's just a lot more in play with some of the federal, with the budget bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bills. So that would, I think, greatly increase some of the money out there for some of these programs. But I don't know what's in Virginia, Dave. I don't know if you have that off the top of your head or.
Yep. Okay. Virginia has put out some for the class 4 to 8 trucks, but the big splash has been they put out money for transit buses. They also put out the first round for school buses, which was $10 million. They got about 40 buses out of that. They also now just released, I think last week, Alan, if that's right, they released the second round opportunity, and that's all going through the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. They're the administrator for the Volkswagen programs in Virginia. So they're putting out another $10 million for electric school buses. And a number of states have used that approach too. Maryland actually did a round for electric school bus demonstrations, although they only did a handful, but they're getting ready at the beginning of next year. They're going to put out another bundle for school buses. They told me this week at that international event, and they're going to be willing to pay this time around up to $300,000 per bus. Before they were doing 80% of the price. Now they're going to do 300,000. But Virginia, like I said, 2 rounds of school buses, a round of transit buses, some 4 to 8. The other thing is they also put out a community level project, which they put $10 million out there for communities to request money toward electrification. And then, yeah, like Jen said, DERA, the upcoming infrastructure and budget reconciliation bills, if they come out, you're talking $2.5 billion for electric school buses, $2.5 billion for clean school buses, which can include electric school buses. So there may be a lot of things floating around out there. The last round in the Virginia legislature actually passed a bill to create a bin, at least, to put the federal money in for electric school buses if and when it comes to Virginia. So, I mean, there's been a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of desire to figure out what to do. Obviously, Dominion did an incentive program effectively for its pilot demonstration for electric school buses. So they've got 50 school buses out there now in about 15 school districts. So, I mean, there's a lot of things floating around. A lot of them are initial is the way to look at them. The serious money is if the federal legislation gets passed. That's going to be a little bit more serious in the way of dollar figures. It's going to take things up a couple orders of magnitude. But there are things floating around. It's just, that's why, to be honest, one of the first places you go when you're wondering about where to find money is see Alan over there. Go to Alan. This is exactly what he prides himself on, is keeping up on exactly where all the financial incentives are for somebody to get alternative fuel vehicles in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
And I've cloned myself about 6 times with the Virginia Clean City staff. David's right. It's $300,000 in Virginia for those electric school buses that are open right now. And then there's periodically funding from the federal government. Virginia is strongly considering the electric vehicle medium duty goals, which would be like 30% electric vehicles by the end of this decade for the medium duty. And that would require a ton of incentives. And so those vehicles would need to be fully incentivized in states that do that. And so there could be some really interesting programs coming through the Virginia state legislature or from utilities on that. And that was what my whole day has been, is sitting in regulatory meetings, hanging out with Robin, and it's been some good stuff. If for light duty and government vehicles, there is that CMAQ program. And so Virginia has been knocking on the door of the federal government to help some local governments with light duty vehicles, or state government. Richmond, Northern Virginia, or the Tidewater area, there might be an incremental cost incentive coming back online. We used to have that a couple of years ago, and we're hopeful that will come back online.
Yeah, actually, one of the other things I was going to say, going back, kind of tying to a little bit of that, but also tying back to the whole fleet transition question too, is, if you have a fleet that has everything from light duty to heavy duty, you've got to think a little bit on the timing also when you're talking about the charging equipment, because typically you're not going to use the same charging equipment for a sedan that you're going to use for something the size of a tractor trailer. So that's part of the phasing too. I mean, I got a beautiful walkthrough at the Fairfax event yesterday that Dominion had. I got there early. They actually walked me through everything they had to do to actually set up the infrastructure for the 8 electric school buses that they have sitting there. And they literally were opening cabinets and stuff. And it was actually enlightening because, a lot of people are used to, okay, if you're talking about a light duty vehicle, you have this nice little unit, but, obviously folks who put in charging, many of whom are on this call, understand there's a big difference between a light duty charger and a medium or heavy duty charger.
I'll add one more thing before we hop on to the next question too. I think Jennifer did mention, but there are often times for like public fleets, there are procurement contracts that you can also hop on if you are school fleets, things like that. Like in Virginia right now, we have the Virginia Sheriff's Association, which has a number of EVs and hybrids that are open not just to Sheriff's Association, members of the Sheriff's Association, but any public body. So that might be a place for you to look. There are also other groups like Sourcewell, things like that, that can provide some level of discounts or even just make the procurement process easier. And then we also got another question, which is, do VEIC services include consulting with municipalities, such as helping them with recommendations regarding infrastructure and vehicles?
Yes, we do actually. That's an important segment for us, and we have done some work directly with municipalities and other public entities, states, municipalities, water districts,
Transit.
you name it, transit. But yes, we do. And we just finished a project. Actually, it was really interesting. I think I mentioned the city of Montpelier net zero energy. They have a net zero energy target, and we're looking at their municipal operations. So we were able to come in as an organization and look at both their buildings and their fleet comprehensively and make recommendations on what it would take for them to meet their goals by 2030. So yeah, that was a really interesting project, but we're beginning to see more interest in things like that, where you're looking at the overall operations of the municipality. And I'm here as a transportation representative in the organization, but we do have capabilities to look holistically at energy generation, buildings, and vehicles.
Yeah, in fact, one of one of the things that makes us a little unusual, the transportation group is actually a relatively smaller part of VEIC. A lot of the companies dealing with buildings,
But mighty.
huh?
Small but mighty.
Small but strong, yes. But I mean, a lot of the companies dealing with energy efficiency, dealing with buildings, dealing with a lot of that stuff, even through, so that we understand the facility side too. In fact, one of the things that we do under the DC Sustainable Energy Utility is we actually work with WMATA, in other words, Metrobus in the district. And we actually work with them on the facility side and have actually figured out how to save them millions of dollars a year through energy efficiency upgrades, which they can then take and turn around and pour into, like safety and operation investments. Because it's their annual, it's their annual budget that they're saving by doing energy efficiency. So we kind of understand both sides of that, particularly as folks like transit and even school bus and some of the medium and heavy duty areas move toward electrification. The facility is really a critical element in the chain. So we've sort of got the advantage that because we have the people who understand the building side as well as the vehicle side, we've got a little bit of an advantage there, we think.
Well, awesome. Thank you for those great answers. And we are getting close to the end of the hour. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to shout them out, put them in the chat. And as we move to close, I'm going to put some contact information for the chat in the chat for everyone. This is Jennifer's contact information, Dave's contact information, and my own. And then I also just want to plug our next technology happy hour. That will be taking place on November 18th at 4 p.m. And we'll be hearing from ABM about their work on sustainable facilities. They do a lot of work with charging infrastructure planning. So if you're interested on that end, please feel free to register. The link is in the chat. And then you can also visit us at vacleancities.org and look at our events there. But yeah, if we have any last minute questions, I will open up the floor again.
I saw one pop up about what does VEIC stand for. So we started as the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, but now we're just an acronym. So doesn't technically stand for anything anymore.
Well, as you saw, we worked throughout the country and everybody kept saying, oh, you're the Vermont people. And of course, I come in and I'm in Virginia and I just say, well, I'm VEIC. Everybody assumes the V is for Virginia. Regrettably, it's not, but we do work anywhere. So, but on behalf of Jennifer, I mean, we really want to thank Virginia Clean Cities for the opportunity to present today. We really appreciate it. And, feel free to follow up with us if you all have questions. That's what we're here for.
Excellent.
Yeah,
well,
thank you, everybody.
So much. Yes, thank you for joining us. This has been great. Excited to continue to work with you guys in the future.
Same. Thank you so much. It's nice to meet everybody.
With that, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Thursday afternoon. Take care, everyone.